The Windup and the Steal, a baseball mystery written by Amanda Zieba. Hey teachers, before you start listening, make sure you get the full lesson plan and all of the printables, including this story text and many fun extension activities, down in the video description box. It'll save you a ton of time and help you engage your students. Part 1, Pregame. The Windup and the Steal by Amanda Zieba. Part 1, Pregame. His real name was Bartholomew, but no one ever called him that, not since he was 2. Nope, everyone called him Bear. Over the course of the last 40 years, Bear became a major league legend. He'd been in the league nearly 2 decades. It was easy, even for newbie fans, to recognize him. Every bit of his 6-foot 4-inch frame personified his animal namesake. It was there in the way he lumbered up to the pitching mound. It was there in the size of his hands that on more than one occasion had been referred to as paws. It was there in his dark brown bushy beard and eyebrows, there in his fierce competitive drive, there in the way he grunted and growled his answers to reporters at a post-game press conference. Pitch after pitch, Bear never seemed to tire. Even when the stadium thermometer read 90 and sweat ran down his neck in rivers, he stayed in the game, inning after inning after inning. Bear had thrown more complete games than anyone else ever had. When Bear started a game, everyone expected him to stay in for the long haul. What people didn't expect is what happened one fateful night game mid-May. It was Bear bobblehead night, and as Bear stood on the field and looked into the stands with his exceptional eyesight, he could see hundreds of miniature dolls, all wearing his signature number 8, nodding their heads at him. Yes, yes, the bobblehead seemed to say, this is what life is all about. A team of people you care about, a game of skill, a formidable opponent, a crowd of adoring fans. At that moment, the stadium DJ started playing his infamous walkout song, his favorite song, a song that told his mind and body it was time to go to work, that it was time to play ball. But just as he wound up and was about to release a warm-up pitch to the catcher, something in the crowd caught his eye, and he paused. In addition to his rock-solid performances, fans could always count on Bear's pre-game ritual, a tradition nearly as legendary as his fastball. After warming up, he would walk from the mound, past the catcher, past the ump, and right up to the net behind home plate. Through the checkered board of ropes, he'd chat with whoever happened to be sitting in those front row seats. Bear had seen all sorts of strange things behind home plate: ecstatic fans, confused umpires, dancing mascots, famous celebrities, and once, during an 8-game winning streak, an entire convent of nuns. And for every game he started, Bear chatted with them. He never told anyone except his wife, but the first time he walked back behind the plate, he thought he'd recognize someone in those seats. When he got close, he realized it was a stranger. Not wanting to look foolish, he played it off and started talking to the fans. He said it reminded him of why he loved the game, that baseball was serious work, but also supposed to be fun. And you know what? It was fun. The conversations became his favorite part of game day. Well, outside of the actual ball playing. He always loved that the most. While so much of his life followed a strict, repetitive rhythm, this one moment remained unpredictable and unscripted. The media pundits always scoffed at these visits, but really they were just jealous because Bear rarely gave them a decent soundbite. All he provided were his stellar statistics. Perhaps Bear enjoyed these little chats so much because there wasn't a microphone in his face. But tonight, something was different. Stranger than any rock star, fanatic, or media stunt sat a thief. Not just any thief, the thief. As famous as Bear was on the mound, Danny Tortuga was in the world of crime. In fact, Bear had just finished watching a documentary about him last night. Tortuga had stolen cars, statues, jewels, priceless paintings, even on one bizarre occasion, a foreign kingdom, although he did give that one back. But the real point was, he had never been caught, a Houdini of heists, and now here he was, sitting calmly behind the home plate at Bear's game, as if he belonged there. Bear rubbed his eyes, wondering if he was hallucinating, but when he looked back into the stands, he knew what he saw. The face was too fresh in his memory, too frequent on tabloid covers not to recognize. Bear turned to look at Robbie, the second baseman. He was the team prankster. Maybe he had hired an actor to create some sort of media stunt or a bit of funny business that only Robbie thought was funny, which wasn't funny. This was a big game. Sure, it was early in the season, but every game mattered. The other thing Bear knew about Robbie, though, was that he was a horrible liar. He could never hide his pranks for long. Bear scrutinized his second baseman. Robbie was all business and not the funny kind. He didn't have even the hint of a smile on his usually friendly face, so maybe what Bear was seeing really was real? One thing was for certain, there was no way he was going to be able to focus on the game if he didn't find out for sure. Just as soon as he finished warming up, he would go find out. Unfortunately, the warm-up didn't go well. Bear kept missing his spot. His eyes, which should have been trained on his catcher's glove, kept wandering to Danny to see if he was still there. Eventually, Bear let out a giant sigh that sounded awfully close to his trademark growl, and then began walking to the plate. "Hey," Bear called to the man behind the foul ball net when he got close. "Are you Danny Tortuga?" Inexplicably, the man smiled. "I am." "What are you doing here?" Bear asked. "At the game." "I came to watch you," Danny said. "Aren't you afraid of being caught?" Bear asked. He was genuinely curious. "On camera?" "Yes. Actually, I hoped I would be," Danny explained. "Being seen on national television is going to be a great alibi." "A great alibi for what?" Bear asked. "For the job I've got running right now." The cameras were on them now. Bear could feel it. Half a lifetime of stardom had trained his nerves to know when he was up on the big screen and the stadium full of people were focused on him. He guessed the commentators were wondering about the man behind home plate and what the country's best pitcher had to talk about with the world's most famous criminal. Bear wasn't mic'd up, and he was glad for it. He was pretty sure that if everyone could hear what he and Danny were saying, Danny would stop talking. And more than anything at this moment, Bear wanted to keep him talking. "What's the job?" Bear asked. "The Met Gala." "Really? What a coincidence. I'm headed there after this." "That doesn't really seem like your scene," Danny said. "I know, but they're unveiling a new exhibit featuring sports uniforms, and my rookie year jersey is going to be included, so I got an invitation." "Interesting," Danny said, and he sounded like he really meant it. "Are you going for the art or the celebrity jewels?" Bear asked. He wasn't sure where the questions were coming from. Why was he talking to this felon? Even if chatting with fans was part of his pregame ritual, he shouldn't be talking to someone so notoriously naughty. It just didn't feel right. And yet, he couldn't stop. "Why? Are you in the market?" Danny asked. "No," Bear said. "Just curious, I guess." Bear had never broken the law. Despite his grisly appearance and perceived demeanor, he was a play by the rules kind of guy. As a kid, he loved playing cops and robbers. He was always the cop, leaving the scheming and thieving to his cousins. But he wasn't a kid now. He was a grown up with a job to do. And yet there was something about this strangely confident man on the other side of the net that kept him magnetized to his presence, even if he was a criminal. Abruptly, his conscience getting the better of him, Bear decided that this conversation had gone on long enough. "Well, it was nice to chat with you," Bear said awkwardly, not really sure how to end the conversation. Did criminals appreciate common courtesies? Bear figured he'd rather be safe than sorry. He didn't want to be on this man's bad side. "Enjoy the game." "Same to you," Danny said, and tipped his ball cap in Bear's direction. "And thanks." Danny pointed to the big screen where their faces had resided for the past few minutes. "You just made my job a lot easier." Bear didn't know how to feel about that information. He didn't want any part in Danny's crimes, no matter how interesting of a fellow he was. As Bear lumbered back to the mound, he wondered if he should tell someone about the upcoming robbery. He knew the answer was yes, but when? Right now? Should he just walk off the field and find a security guard or call the police? Wouldn't Danny know what he was doing? What would Danny do then? Would he lash out? Would he hurt someone? Danny had never resorted to violence before, at least not according to the documentary Bear watched. Danny was the sneaky, silent sort of thief, but there was always a first time for everything, wasn't there? If Danny did react badly, would the game be delayed? How would that affect the players? Would stopping the theft be worth the repercussions of putting people in the stadium in jeopardy? 1,000 questions poured through Bear's mind as he made the 90-foot walk back to the mound. When he turned around and looked back at Danny to better gauge the situation, Danny was gone. Bear scanned the crowd, looking for Danny first, and when he couldn't find him, he looked for his wife, Anna, his Annabelle, who was always at every game, no matter what. Rain or shine, winning streak or losing slump, more than he could count on anything or won any ritual or game, he could count on her. When their eyes locked, a piece of him that had felt missing clicked into place. Bear brought his glove up to his chest, rested over his heart, and winked at her. Annabelle repeated the gesture. With his final pregame ritual complete, Bear was ready to begin the game. End of part 1. Part 2, the game. Usually Bear had no trouble focusing on a game. Whatever troubles and drama were happening in the outside world didn't matter. During a game, it was just him, the ball, and the 3 men at the plate: the batter, the catcher, and the umpire. Nothing mattered more than the next pitch. Last year, the night after his father died, Bear was scheduled to pitch. His coach offered to let him skip his turn in the rotation, but Bear wouldn't allow it. He looked forward to the distraction of counting balls and strikes, of the feel of leather in his hands, of putting everything else in his life away to deal with later, even if it was only 9 innings later. That night, Bear pitched a no-hitter, his 8th, a record-breaking feat. But tonight was a different story. Bear couldn't shake the questions that swirled in his mind. Thoughts flew up and into his conscious mind as unexpectedly as a thunderstorm in the desert, unsettling his usually steady demeanor. What was Danny doing now? How long had he been planning this heist? Will this be the time he gets caught? Could I be the one who helps capture him? What if I do nothing and he gets away? Again. Whack! The crack of the bat brought Bear back to the game. A ball flew straight at his head, a line drive straight back at the pitcher, right back at him. Bear put his glove up instinctually and made the catch. A lucky break from a ball that could have broken his face. Out number 3, inning over. Bear was distracted, off kilter, out of sorts, and it was affecting the game. The worst part was, Bear wasn't the only one who knew it. Everyone was looking at him. Well, they were always looking at him, but never like this. Never with these side-eyed glances and whispers behind their hands. They knew something was up, but did they know? Bear wondered. Did anyone else know? They weren't losing, but the game was close. Tied at 8 runs each, he'd have to thank the hitters tomorrow for saving the game and putting up enough runs to cancel out his uncharacteristically poor performance. Maybe he'd order breakfast burritos to be delivered to his team tomorrow morning. Bear shook his head. What are you doing, man? Thinking about breakfast burritos? It is not tomorrow. It is tonight. It is now. It is game time. The next half an inning passed, but despite his best attempts at a self-pep talk, Bear was no closer to regaining control of his thoughts. They flew scattershot around the ballpark, pinging off the jumbotron, the security guards, and the luxury watch advertisement poster hanging in left field. What is Danny going to steal? Has he done it already? Does anyone know yet? Without really realizing how, Bear was back on the bench. The sound of the organ interrupted his thoughts. Take me out to the ball game. The 7th-inning stretch. Just 2.5 innings left. Just 2.5 more innings and he could go. Go and do what? He didn't know. But something. Go and do something. But first, however, he had to finish this game. Bear gripped the bench, focused on the feel of the wood in his hands, the scratch of his metal cleats on the concrete dugout floor. When the final notes of the iconic song faded away, Bear was clearer-headed, or at least out from under the mental haze that he had been fogging his brain. While his team spent the next half an inning battling at the plate, Bear fought his way back to mental control 1 inch at a time. When the inning was over, Bear stood and made his way out to the field. It was time to get back to work. For real. He threw out a warm-up pitch, and a second, and a third. Bear directed every ounce of his nervous energy into the ball and sent it toward home plate. After the 4th, his catcher, Pete Ramos, a man who had been with the team almost as long as Bear, walked the ball back out to the mound. "Glad to have you back, man," Pete said. "I was getting a little worried there for a bit." Yeah, Bear said. I'm sorry about that. I'm distracted tonight. You're never distracted, Pete said. Bear shrugged. Only human, I guess. Pete smiled. Had me fooled. Listen, Bear said, letting his eyes stray from Pete's face to scan the crowd. I have somewhere I really need to be. Mind if we finish this game up quick? Fine by me. Thanks, Pete. Bear took the ball from his friend. Get ready. They're going to come in fast. Pete nodded and then turned back to set up behind the dish. Bear squeezed the ball in his hand and looked up at the Jumbotron. In his days, his team had scored a run. Top of the eighth, and they were winning, but barely, which meant that if the other team didn't score at all, they wouldn't need to play the bottom of the ninth, and he could get out of there even faster, could get to the Met Gala even sooner, could find Danny and figure out what he is up to sooner. In the next two innings, Bear did the unthinkable. He struck out six sequential batters on three pitches each. Boom, boom, boom. They won the game. Bear skipped the team celebration. He refused to attend the press conference and answer the reporters' questions. He showered as if he was 8 years old again and running through the sprinkler. He slapped on his tux, doused himself in cologne, and sped over to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. As he dashed up the red carpeted steps and past a mob of disappointed photographers, he had only one thing on his mind. I have to find Danny. I have to find Danny. I have to find. End of part 2. Part 3. Postgame. Bear had been to the Metropolitan Museum of Art once before, on a date with his wife, before she was his wife. Even though he didn't love fancy stuff like the paintings and sculptures featured there, she did, and he loved her. So he had gone. And now he was back, wishing he had paid more attention then, because he had no idea where he was going. A small part of him wondered where his wife was. They had planned to meet at the gala, but the bigger part of his brain kept repeating the same question. Where is Danny? Where is Danny? Where is Danny? And when he wasn't asking himself that, he was asking, is he still here? Why would he be here? Where will he go next? After searching the exhibits featuring jewels and European paintings, he finally ended up in the fashion section and the display set up to commemorate the rookie year jersey. There, inexplicably, tucked into a shadowy corner, was Danny, and he was smiling right at Bear. At that moment, Bear's line of questioning finally ceased. His mind stopped and his feet took control. His feet moved him across the room, past the exhibit, past everyone who was not Danny Tortuga. Danny started walking too, away from Bear. At first, Danny moved backward, keeping eye contact with Bear, but once he was sure the baseball player was following him, he turned and walked more quickly, out of the room, down the hall, through another doorway, and then to a staircase. At the bottom of the staircase there was a door, and Danny took it. So did Bear. Suddenly, they were outside beneath a sky full of stars. At least, that's the way it felt to Bear. It might have just been the city lights, but for some reason, everything felt bigger and brighter to Bear tonight. Noisier, fuller, full of so many, many distractions. What are you doing? Where are you going? What did you steal? The questions overflowed from Bear's mouth like fully cooked kernels from the concession stand popcorn machine. I came to steal from you, Danny said calmly. Me? Bear asked. He thought he should be afraid, but he wasn't. He reached inside his coat pocket of his tux and pulled out his wallet. He thumbed through the bills, a few hundred at most. He handed it to Danny. He didn't know why. Not your money, Danny said with a soft chuckle. I came to steal your focus. Steal the game. For a full 8 seconds, Bear said nothing. So Danny continued. You are the greatest pitcher that has ever lived. Your skill, your focus is legendary. Nothing rattles you. Nothing shakes your confidence. Nothing steals your focus. So I wanted to see if I could. Pretty great feat for someone not even on the field, huh? I won, Bear said. I mean, we did. We won the game. You lost, Danny said decisively. Bear thought about it. about tonight, about how everything in his head went topsy-turvy the moment he saw Danny at the game. How if this was a battle between just the two of them, Danny was likely the one who came out on top. You're half right, Bear finally agreed. I didn't heist the game, Danny conceded, but I definitely got your attention, so I'm considering it a win. Bear wrinkled his nose and swallowed the bitter flavor in his mouth. He did not like to lose. Never had. And the gala? Bear asked. Just a convenient meeting spot? Danny tipped his head back and looked up at the sky. More than convenient, he said. This job, it's a shell game. I've been busy keeping everyone looking over here, over there, looking everywhere but where the action really is. And where is that? Bear asked. My guess is that you'll likely find out tomorrow. In the news. I wish I could hang around and tell you all about it, but I have places to be. And shouldn't you be finding your wife? At that final word, Bear turned on his heel and charged through the door. But the door was locked. Of course it was. It was nothing more than an emergency exit. It wasn't meant for visitors to go in, or anyone to go in, really. Bear gave one final look over his shoulder at Danny before he bolted for the front entrance. His feet pounded the pavement and then the red carpeted stairs for a second time. He disappointed the photographers yet again and then disrupted the entire spectacle of people gathered in the entryway as he shouted, Anna! Anna! Annabelle Stone! In the end, she found him, her eyes filled with worry and confusion. Bear, she said comfortingly. Bear, I'm here. She put her hands on his bearded face and pulled his line of sight down to match hers. Bear, I'm right here. Bear pulled his wife into a huge bear hug. At that moment, nothing mattered more than Anna. In that moment, Bear decided he didn't want anything to matter more than her ever again. Bear officially retired from baseball the very next day. When he finally agreed to sit down with reporters and talk over his decision a few weeks later, the questions came at him fast and furious. But they all boiled down to pretty much the same thing. Why are you retiring? Bear shook his head and looked straight at the camera. For most of my life, baseball was number one. It outranked almost everything in my life. Every decision I made was balanced against the results it would yield on the mound. What I ate, how I exercised, sure, but more than that. How long should I live at my house here in New York or the one in Arizona during spring training? Whether Anna or I could go on a vacation, whether or not we would bring kids into this strictly scheduled life. Baseball's given me so much, but it's taken some things too, things I'm not so sure I want to give anymore. I'm grateful for all of it. The time with my teammates, the wins, the awards, the personal satisfaction I've earned from doing a thing I love for so long. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to give this team, this city, and this sport everything I have, but I've decided that I'm done giving my everything to this game. I've decided that I'm going to take for a while. Take some time for me, for my wife, for our life. The reporters didn't know what to do with all of that. These were maybe more words than Bear had ever spoken at a press conference, ever, let alone strung together in such an eloquent and emotional message. So Bear surprised them again when he continued. You might not believe it, but I want to thank Danny Tortuga for helping me come to this conclusion. Danny Tortuga? A reporter in the front row asked. The thief who stole the Egyptian sarcophagus last month? Is that what he stole the night of the Met Gala? Never mind. I don't want to know. What I do know is that Danny helped me realize I want to change my focus. He challenged me to a game and I lost. And that loss might have been the most valuable lesson I have ever learned. And for that, I'm grateful. Danny, if you're listening, thank you. Bear said that last line looking right into the camera, hoping that Danny was watching. You're welcome, Danny shouted from the back of the room. The room was quiet for exactly 8 seconds before someone shouted, Get him! And the press room erupted in pandemonium. The end. Or, at least again for now, if you pick up some of the creative writing worksheets, you can continue this story and tell me what happens. I'd love to hear how you carry on this story of Bear the Pitcher and Danny the Thief. Speaking of worksheets and lesson plans and prompts, this story is just the start. I have a podcast all around this story, and a song and vocabulary and writing prompts and a nonfiction one-pager, and so much more for you to practice your reading skills in a way that is actually fun. So be sure to check the video description box for a link to grab all of these. Thank you so much for visiting my channel, Learning with the Word Nerd. I hope you come back again. I'll see you again next time. Happy reading.